Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. March is Women's History Month, a time to recognize the diverse accomplishments of women. Here in Michigan, the Career Mastered Women's History Awards were given to a group of women who are leaders and role models. The National Living Legend Award was presented to Detroit-born actress, activist, and author Denise Nicholas. She stopped by the WDET studios to talk with me about her legendary career and her participation in the civil rights movement. Let's start in 1964. You were a student at the University of Michigan. You're 19 years old, and you decide that what you want to do is go south to be part of the Free Southern Theater. Give us an idea of what was in your mind at that point, and I want to know what your parents thought about that decision.
Well, it wasn't a good day.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Well, you know, there was a lot of activity on campus at University of Michigan at that time.
Yes.
And a lot of civil rights movement people were coming to campus to talk about what was going on in the South and also to convince other students to join the civil rights movement. And so I was affected by those speakers, as were quite a few other people on campus. Yeah. So I thought, well, how can I do this? How can I involve myself in a way that doesn't scare me half to death, but it also is kind of in the direction of the arts. Yeah. And that's when I found the Free Southern Theater. So I joined the Free Southern Theater, which was a part of SNCC, really. Right. So I went to Jackson, Mississippi. I was there for 2 years. The theater moved to New Orleans eventually. And we toured all over Mississippi and some places in Louisiana. It was an incredible, incredible 2 years that I wouldn't change for anything, including the bomb that exploded on the stage in Macomb.
I was going to say, I mean, this was you say that you were looking for a way to participate in this and maybe be safe, but that there was no guarantee of that if you were doing anything.
There was no safety anywhere in Mississippi at that time. There really wasn't. I think our experiences were so riveting and so profound that you carried the fear with you and you just dealt with it on a daily basis. For one night in Ruleville, Mississippi, I stayed in Fannie Lou Hamer's home when the theater toured to Ruleville, and we had to sleep on the floor because the Klan was shooting into the house, and that happened a lot. You know, that happened a lot in Holmes County. We got there to perform, and the community center had been burned down. So they were in the process of building a new community center. So we performed in a half-built community center, and it was beautiful. As hard as it was, seeing the awakening and the will of the people to make a change, just like these students now out on the streets demonstrating against all this gun violence. It's the same energy. I'm so heartened by these kids. I'm like, they're on TV and I'm just, yes, just keep going, don't stop.
Wow. So what did your parents say when you said, hey, I'm going to leave school and I'm going to go be part of this movement in the South, and I don't know what will happen to me? What was their reaction?
My mother was terrified. She didn't talk to me for a couple of years. She talked to me when I got to New York 2 years later. So my dad was more philosophical about it because he was a race man. I mean, he's a Detroit person, and he was a person who was in the race riot in Detroit in the 42 or 43?
43, yeah.
He had stories to tell. So he was afraid for me, but he understood. He absolutely understood.
I'm intrigued by your sort of instant identification with the kids who are protesting now, and it's a great sort of way to talk about the differences between what happened in the 60s, what's happening now, and the similarities. I'm always really interested in hearing people who were around for what happened in the 60s talk about what they see today, not just with kids in gun violence. Black Lives Matter is another, I think, echo of that time. Do you feel sometimes like we're going back to the 60s here in America?
Yes. Actually, I think we're going back to the 30s.
To the 30s, even further.
I don't think we're going to the 60s. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we're definitely in a retrograde kind of frame of mind in this country, and it's frightening to me because all the work, or most of the work that's been done to create at least the hope that we could reach a better place seems to be just pilfering away.
Yeah.
And so these kids coming now at this point, especially during this particular administration, that's what gives me hope. And it's not that the other organizations over the last 3 years have not, but the timing is what is so powerful to me. It's the timing. It's the shootings in Parkland and the way they talk about it, the way they speak about it. It reminds me of the Stokely Carmichaels and the other leaders of the civil rights movement who spoke so brilliantly about what was going on in the South and what we had to gain and what we had to lose if we kept sitting down and not standing up.
Yeah.
So these kids are standing up, and they're doing it with so much surety, so much strength. It's like, where did you come from? Who taught you this?
Right.
I mean, these are high school kids. And remember, most of the civil rights movement kids were college kids.
Right.
These are
They were
high school
older.
kids.
Right. Yeah.
And they're talking like they're like university kids. I'm listening to these kids. I'm going,
Where'd you
are
get that, right?
Who are your teachers? Who are your parents?
Yeah.
They're just they're beautiful. They are beautiful.
Yeah. Denise, I'm going to talk about your later career after going south and then to New York, becoming an actress. You decided at some point that you wanted to be an author.
Yes.
So you walked away and wrote a book.
It wasn't quite that simple,
Yeah,
but
right?
yeah,
And
that's
I make
the
it
end
sound
result.
like
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
Just go write a book.
Not quite.
Yeah. I mean, I read about the process that you went through to write your first book, and it's really remarkable. I mean, it's remarkable in the sense that I think it portrays, again, the struggle to do something that's art, but also extremely socially relevant. And the story you tell is very much sort of a reflection of the things that you had experienced up to that point.
I think from my experiences at University of Michigan, and particularly my experiences in the South, it created for me an eternal context. And the context for me as a black woman in America is always going to be based in struggle because we're so far from the finish line. So I don't think I could comfortably write without including that context because it shapes everything that I see and feel. I never let it go. I never let Mississippi go, really.
Yeah.
I can't because it's like a branding. And I knew pretty early on that experience would probably shape something about me for the rest of my life. That's how powerful it was.
That's very powerful imagery as well, that it's like a branding.
Yeah,
it
was.
Yeah, and you continue to write. You have a new play.
Yes,
That
this is my last civil rights movement.
Your last.
People are saying, will you get off the civil rights movement, Denise? Will you move on?
Well,
and I'm saying, move on to what?
I was going to say, it's more relevant now, it seems, given what's going on. I mean, these are not old stories.
No.
They're new again.
No, in fact, there's some people who are optioning Freshwater Road, my novel, for film who say now to them the book is more relevant today than when it was first published in 2005 and 6.
Wow.
So that's great. But the play is called Letters from Freedom Summer. Ricardo Kahn is the lead person on that project, and he brought me in after reading Freshwater Road. He wanted to adapt it to the stage. I said, no, let's do something fresh. So let's start from scratch and do a new piece, which we have done. And it opens at University of Missouri, Kansas City, the first week of May.
You know, when I was just over the last couple of days, I was thinking about these bombings that are happening in
Texas.
In Texas, right? People just going out finding packages on their front stairs, and it blowing up. That does remind me, and I was not alive for the 60s, but it does remind me of the things I've read about that time, the volatility of that time. And I mean, I absolutely hear what you're saying going back further, but the 60s seem to be revisiting us in some of the awfulness, I guess.
Yes, I think so. I think it's unleashed. I think the demons have been unleashed probably mostly by the current administration. I don't want to give it all there, but Certainly there's a responsibility to bear. For example, I, as a fairly liberated woman, feel a certain nervousness about going into certain situations that I never felt nervous about previous to last year. And it's because I don't want to be confronted by the insanity that I see rising up in this country.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a fighter. I can't beat somebody up, and I don't want to be beaten up, and I don't want to be spoken to in a way that's dismissive and angry and negative.
Yeah.
So, and I know if I'm feeling that, other people are feeling it as well.